It's not always easy, but human beings are constantly coming up with new, inventive, and often hilarious ways to beat the system. From the Titanic's sneakiest survivor to the kid who faked his way into meeting his idols, let's check out some genius people who beat the system. Parking fees are one of the worst things about owning a vehicle in a city, but this bike owner found a way to get around it by following the rules to the nearest foot. Parked up between two parking zones, it looks like this brave-hearted biker isn't afraid to fit into a tight space if it means free parking. I only hope a passing ticketing officer didn't stick them with a fine just for being so bold. When you're a big fan of a band, you'll go to great lengths for a chance to hang out with your idols. But Australian David Spargo, a fan of the band Peking Duck, exhibited a stroke of pure genius when he decided to find a way backstage at a gig. With no hope of gaining a backstage pass through conventional means, David turned to Wikipedia for a chance to meet the band. Changing Peking Duck's Wikipedia page to list himself as family to the band, he flashed the updated page to security, hoping it might convince them to let him in. Amazingly, security bought it and led him right on through to the backstage area. Once there, he met the band and explained his entry methods over a few beers, much to the band's amazement. Peking Duck were so impressed, they even posted about the escapade online, and later called David the definition of a legend in an interview. They say you should never meet your idols, but for David Spargo, his fan encounter couldn't have had a more legendary result. Music fans aren't the only people who are willing to bend the rules for the things they love. After a soccer fan in Turkey was banned from attending his favorite team's home grounds, he got creative to really send the message of his fan loyalty home. Hiring a crane for the best view in the house, he headed to the skies, allowing him to watch his favorite team play an important match for free. Well, as long as you don't factor in the 354 liras or $50 for the crane hire costs. When it comes to people pretending to be someone they're not for personal gain, the father of Reddit user Silly American is king. When the Redditor's old man found himself unable to get a booking at a busy local restaurant, he called again, this time posing as the Prime Minister of Morocco. Why he went for that particular fake identity is unclear, as the similarities of their appearances are a bit of a stretch. But regardless, it worked. The restaurant cleared a slot for the Redditor's father, giving him the best seat in the house upon arrival. The restaurant's bamboozled chef even requested him to sign a plate. Committed to the character, the master of deception obliged, and even snapped a picture to commemorate the moment he played the system in the most spectacular of ways. It's one thing to impersonate a public figure for one night, but what if I told you that some deceptions of this kind last years, and with much higher stakes? Well, it's true, and this tale takes us to southeastern Europe, where we find this guy. No, not Pamela Anderson, the gray-haired fellow to her left. This is Stefan Cernetic, Prince of Montenegro and Macedonia, or so the elite circles of Europe believed for years. Like any other prince, he spent much of his time making public appearances all over the European continent on behalf of the two countries he supposedly represented. Nobody ever questioned the prince's credentials, and he was even seen regularly handing out recognition awards to celebrities. But it turned out all those awards bestowed by the prince were about as valuable as used toilet paper, because he wasn't actually a prince. In fact, there was no Prince of Macedonia, and the Montenegrin Foreign Ministry claimed never to have heard of the supposed official. Investigations by various European governments found the so-called prince to be nothing more than an extremely brazen con man, assisted by an equally audacious unnamed companion. While he was ultimately caught, arrested, and charged with fraud, I can't fault this guy for the effort. After all, to fool an entire continent for years in order to live like a prince seems like a seriously ballsy way to play the system to me. He even made a website, albeit one that hurts the eyes to look at. But if you ever give fake royalty a try, just make sure not to get caught, because sometimes the system comes around to play you right back. Some say the mark of a true genius is doing things the smart way, not the hard way. If that's true, then the mother of this Twitter user must be the Einstein of her generation. Rather than taking her daughter's phone charger down to her, she simply tied it around the dog who was upstairs with her and told her daughter to call him down. So the Twitter user called him down, and the good boy arrived right on time, providing a very reliable and very cute delivery service. Unfortunately, not all journeys reach their destination as planned. The RMS Titanic, which famously sunk in the North Atlantic Ocean in 1912, is well known as a tragedy for the lives lost. But one of its survivors owed his life to a heaping handful of devious deception. Nikola Lulic, a Croatian on a journey to work as a miner in the USA, boarded the ship as a third-class passenger. Unfortunately, when disaster struck and the ship began to sink, third-class passengers were a low priority for the limited spaces on the ship's vastly insufficient lifeboats. Staring inevitable death in the face and defiantly saying, "Not today," Nikola found a way to secure himself a seat. He snatched a cap belonging to a sailor and ran off to secure himself safe passage using his new disguise. It worked, and he boarded a lifeboat to safety, going on to live another 50 years. While his methods may seem a little shady, Nikola Lulic proved that a third-class ticket is no obstacle in the hands of a first-class hustler. If you've ever been to an event at a nightclub or any kind of organized event, you've probably encountered these types of entrance wristbands before. You know, the ones that trap your arm hair in the adhesive and yank it off like an overly eager beautician. Well, thanks to the minimal, simple design of these wristbands and how commonly used they are, a Reddit user spotted an opportunity for some clever counterfeiting. With nothing more than some strips of paper, a green highlighter, a pencil, and a pen, Redditor Gentle Gamers created these convincing knockoffs and successfully conned their way into a party. It's only when you look closely that you see those indentations where the adhesive would usually sit are nothing more than pencil scribblings. But a quick entrance ensured Gentle Gamers was never suspected for a second, and I can only commend this valiant effort at self-invitation. But do you know what doesn't require an invitation? Hitting those like, subscribe, and notification buttons. If you don't, how are you going to learn about all the best ways to stick it to the man? Not to mention all the other amazing fact-based content I post daily. Think of it as the final confirmation that you are indeed a genius. Join the club and get ready to be amazed every day. Now, back to our genius rebels. True rule breakers don't just receive invitations. They apply their commitment to shaking things up to the invitations they give out, too. Like the parents of Twitter user Lexi Rossler, who, in the early 90s, sent out invitations to a costume party at a venue on Halloween. The guests all turned up in a spectacular array of costumes, only to find they'd been duped. It wasn't just a Halloween party. It was Lexi's parents' wedding. The happy couple had no interest in the classic type of ceremony and reception and didn't want the financial burden, so they decided to step outside of the box. Insisting everyone kept their outfits on, it made for some incredibly unique wedding photos, as the confused guests had no choice but to pose in costume. What better way to celebrate the sanctity of marriage than with Energizer bunnies and gangsters, am I right? If more weddings were like this, I bet more people would turn up. I know I would. But what to wear? Something like this? Or maybe this? Let me know what type of costume you think would be best in the comment section below. When an Imgur user's wife asked him to pay for laser hair removal for Christmas, he decided to get in Venom to avoid shelling out for a costly procedure. So, combining dad humor with a can-do DIY attitude, he came up with this. While technically you can't deny it's a tool for hair removal with added lasers, his wife was less than thrilled. But hey, at least her aim would be better from now on. Although that also means she'd have better aim to throw the contraption back at its creator. Heading back in time now to Victoria, Australia in the 1930s, at the height of the global economic crisis that shook the world, known as the Great Depression. The great-grandma of Reddit user Frothy was, like many of her time, doing whatever she could to put food on the table. But with so little food to go around, she was forced to turn to less than honest means. For her, this meant slipping down to the local apple farm where she'd confidently stroll on in, posing as the farm owner's daughter. Of course, the farm owner had no daughter, but thanks to some serious luck, no one she encountered ever questioned her identity. With no suspicion aroused, Frothy's relative would steal crates full of apples, claiming her father had requested them for quality control, and would walk straight out the front door unhindered. The risk was extremely high, as others caught stealing had been handed jail sentences and hefty fines for doing so. But desperate times call for desperate measures, and when you're as skilled at acting like you're doing what you're supposed to do as she was, you make it work. She even did the same thing with the milkman's deliveries to the farm. When he arrived, she'd hide in the bushes at the front gate, wait for the milkman to approach the door, and pilfer a crate while he was distracted. With her cunning, she was able to sustain herself and her family throughout the hardships. According to Frothy, she'd always end the tale with a valuable insight. If you think you're about to get in big trouble, just pretend you were allowed to do what you did. With enough confidence, you'd be surprised how often that works. When things don't go to plan, sometimes it's just a matter of changing perspective. Like when Astor Row Cafe in Harlem, New York received a B hygiene rating instead of the first-rate A they were hoping for. But instead of hiding their less than stellar rating for customers, they went for an approach that was simultaneously completely honest and totally deceptive. They just added a bunch of other letters below the B rating sheet spelling out Sunday brunch and turning their shortcomings into an advertising opportunity. Now that's how you make the best of a brunch situation. It's not just adults that are masters of beating the system. Kids make for some of the greatest rebels around. Just take a look at Twitter user Stephanie Ortiz's daughter, who was snapped by her mom ensuring no one would be taking her turn on the computer. Utilizing tactics that really ought to be declared as war crimes, the inventive kid sprinkled her Legos all over the surrounding floor. Anyone who stepped too close would be met with a type of pain in their feet usually reserved for the tortured souls in the deepest circles of hell. And frankly, it's a stroke of genius. When a similarly resourceful young fellow was tasked with training his family's new puppy, his parents suggested looking up training tips on YouTube. In a stroke of hilarious outside-the-box thinking, the boy cut out the middleman entirely and was snapped showing his puppy the videos firsthand. While the little pup seemed engrossed in the screen, the success of the technique is yet to be confirmed. Just don't be surprised to catch him surfing the web past his bedtime. Another bright idea with a slightly flawed delivery came after a little girl's parents told them no sugary soda was allowed in the house. So, with a commendable but undeniably hilarious effort, the kid stripped the labels off of a soda bottle and added her own, with labels denoting 0 sugar and orange juice on a bottle full of a liquid that seems to be the epitome of sugary soda. The effort didn't go unrecognized. Still, it wasn't enough to fool her mom, though she did share the picture with the world of her offspring's adorably creative approach. Some of the greatest examples of people beating the system emerge when the joint forces of child and parents unite. No other case illustrates this better than the story of Gary Viter and his ingenious schemer of a dad. Throughout the 90s, Gary's dad would take him to big sports games, but never as a paying audience member. You see, Gary's father came up with the ultimate scam. He would ring the venue ahead of time claiming to be from Sports Illustrated for Kids magazine. He'd inform the venue that a kid reporter was coming with a photographer to interview the players for an article. When Gary and his dad arrived in full costume, with cameras, lenses, and notepads, they'd be let right on in. Then they'd go straight to the press area for the best seats, watch the game, and afterwards, mingle with stars and carry out an interview or two. With celebrity encounters ranging from John Elway to Michael Jordan and even Bill Murray, it's fair to say Gary felt he had the best dad in the world. Of course, little Gary was no professional, so his questions usually consisted of, "What's your favorite food?" But being a kid, nobody questioned it. Nobody ever questioned why the interviews never appeared in Sports Illustrated either. The truth only came to the surface in June 2020 when Gary detailed his adventures via an article on the official Sports Illustrated website. I guess Gary did end up having to fulfill his journalistic obligations after all. Clearly seeing the funny side of the affair, Sports Illustrated allowed this fantastical father and son tale of playing the system with ultimate expertise to come full circle. A similar, smaller scale instance of phony sports journalism was shared with the internet by Reddit user Icebergalicious in 2018. Feeling too cold to stand outside while watching an American football game at the local stadium, the quick-thinking scammer spotted an opportunity. Using a pen and paper as disguise, he gained entrance to the warm, comfortable stats and press room. Once inside, a few intermittent scribbles were enough to convince officials he was supposed to be there. Certified genius. Taking to the skies now, we have a nifty way to cop a free flight upgrade, courtesy of Reddit user The New York God. After boarding a plane at the airport, the Redditor was frustrated to hear the plane was having technical issues, and the passengers would have to get off. The final flight of the evening was leaving in 20 minutes, so everybody rushed to attempt to get one of the remaining 8 spots. But with limited spaces, the 40-person-long crowd was met with nothing but disappointment, as they faced the prospect of a long night in the airport. But the Redditor was smart, and as soon as he stepped off the first plane, he rang up the airline's reservation hotline and asked to be switched to the other flight. With his reservation confirmed, he joined the line, watching in glee as almost everyone else was turned away before him. When he reached the desk, he was informed that all standard seats had now been filled, so unfortunately, they only had first class available. Having already booked, the Redditor was put in first class free of charge. In his own words, he laughed and laughed all the way to the free booze and peanuts. While it's impressive to see someone play the system to their own personal gain, people who play the system for the greater good of their community are in a class all of their own. One particular Robin Hood-like figure of this kind is Los Angeles artist Richard Ankrum. After missing his exit while driving along LA's 110 freeway, he realized the highway signs had no indication of an exit to the I-5 North, which undoubtedly caused frustration for other unfamiliar drivers. Years later, Richard was driving the same stretch and noticed the signs still hadn't been modified with the important information. So, he took things into his own hands. Using his skills as a painter, he made a sign for the I-5 himself. By carefully measuring, color matching, cutting, and painting, he produced a near-perfect replica of an interstate sign. Then, with the authority automatically granted by a hard hat and high-visibility jacket, Richard climbed the sign and set his work in place. His masterpiece stayed there, helping travelers for almost a decade before it was officially replaced with a sign that, amazingly, kept Richard's modifications. Richard, you're a true highway hero. Being a local hero is great and all, but sometimes you just have to look out for you. This guy got the right idea to serve himself some proper hydration by using a KFC bucket as a cup. I can't fault his boldness, but if this is a regular occurrence, he may end up getting a free side of diabetes with his jumbo cup. Other thirsty folk with a penchant for rule breaking applied their skills to the obstacle of no alcoholic beverages allowed. Like Eleanor Clark, a British teen who took an alcohol-filled hip flask to her prom that was so large she was able to disguise it as a clutch bag. With this kind of masterful deception, I think British intelligence has a new recruit on the horizon. In another hilarious example of getting drunk by any means possible, we have this fresh-baked solution. Stuffing his bottle into a hollowed-out baguette, this guy made sure he'd be able to settle his stomach with some bread in the instance he drank too much. Thinking ahead, I'll drink to that. All this hydration talk is making me thirsty, but not as thirsty as the male pupils of Iska Academy in England must have been when a heat wave struck in 2017. The boys took a stand after the school declared that shorts were not suitable attire, even in the heat, even though female pupils were allowed to wear skirts. Desperate for some relief from the restrictions of their full-length trousers, the lads got smart. As there was no rule against guys wearing skirts, they raided the wardrobes of their sisters and girlfriends and turned up looking like this. Cool legs all round and point well and truly made. Now it's only a matter of time before kilt uniforms hit the mainstream. I'm on board. Unfortunately, not every attempt at beating the system is a success, but you still have to salute the effort. That's the case with this fellow, who didn't feel like being locked in place after his car got clamped. While it was certainly a bold move to pop the wheel off and throw everything in his trunk, parking companies usually take note of license plates and car details before they clamp. Unless he planned to just keep driving forever, his parking woes would eventually catch up to him. But what are they going to do? Clamp him again? I think not. But people who beat the system aren't always on the wrong side of the law. The smarty pants behind this alternative to a wallet is only looking to keep his valuables safe from criminals. And what looks like a used diaper makes for the perfect deterrent. Because you know, the contents of diapers don't tend to be a source of interest for burglars, and they certainly wouldn't expect to find dollars, cards, and keys inside. At least not in such a clean and aroma-free condition. Just make sure you don't use a soiled diaper if you ever give this a try. Have you ever played the system to your advantage in an ingenious way? I'd love to hear your story, so leave a comment below or drop me an email at stories@beamazed.com and I may feature you with a shout out in a future video. And as always, thanks for watching.